Welcome back to another Lucky Man Survival episode.
So today we are finally finishing the debate, 9mm versus 45 ACP.
Yeah, so I'm pretty well known as the 45 guy here.
And I always will fight and argue for 9mm.
So today we're gonna go ahead and compare not just our everyday carries, because he everyday carries a 9mm and I everyday carry a 45. We'll also go over some of the different types like polymer handles versus full metal, as well as striker fired versus hammer fired.
Yep. So now the reason why we're going to be going over these two differences is because there are some pros and cons to striker fired, just as like there's pros and cons to hammer fired. Now today we do have a hammer fired 9mm, and we have a hammer fired 45, and then we have a striker fired 45, and then we have a striker fired 9mm. So this way we can go over the vast differences between the two types and the two calibers.
All right, let's get to it.
All right, guys, so this is what we're going to be covering today. We have the Canik 9mm, which is a hammer-fired 9mm. We have the Palmetto State Armory Dagger, which is a striker-fired 9mm. Then we have our Kimber Custom LWs, both chambered in 45, and they are both hammer-fired in 45s. And then we have the Smith & Wesson M&P 45, which is a striker-fired 45. So this way we can go over a full range from striker-fired to hammer-fired, from 9mm to 45. This way we have a broad range of how they're going to handle. We're going to have something that's going to be a little bit more lighter recoil, something that's a little heavier recoil, something with a red dot, something with iron sights. This way we have as much good data that we can have when we are actually shooting at the targets.
All right, so we're going to start with our 45s, and we're going to shoot at our targets with the 1911s and see how it comes out on the target.
And now granted, me and Parker are pretty accurate and pretty together on our shooting patterns. So there's not a big thing for change of variety with that, but we're gonna see who can handle the recoil a little bit better and who can get back on target and get very precise shots. And then from there, we're gonna switch to our 9mm. We're gonna go from there and just basically keep going down the line until we've each shot everything and we're able to identify the data to make sure, just for this specific test, we're gonna be testing accuracy and follow-up shots. All right, guys, so let's get to it. All right, guys, so I'm gonna start first with my 45, and then we're gonna go from there, okay? All right, so that wasn't too bad. You know, at 7 yards, I'd be pretty happy with that one.
All right, 1911, 45, 7 yards.
So, just from seeing the actual targets, Parker definitely outshot me with the 45. So, all right, guys, so next we're gonna do the striker fired 45. Now we only have one of those, so we're each gonna take a turn at the target. That way we can, we're gonna write out on the data on each of the papers, and then we'll take pictures later to show you guys the accuracy we had, okay? All right, Parker, I'll reload for you.
All right, my turn with this M&P 45.
So, funny thing happened. So, I shot the PSA at the target and realized that we had lost our 0 on the red dot, which is a con for a red dot as well. So, we're going to continue the test with iron sights. You will see on my target, I took another 7 shots with iron sights, which is off camera. And then Parker is going to pick up and do the iron sights on the PSA from there. We'll see you in a minute. All right, guys, so next we're gonna be shooting the Canik. Not too bad.
All right, so last is most certainly least, me with the Canik. We're gonna see how I do. All right, guys, so you saw how we did shooting each different type of gun.
Now, of course, besides the wind factor that we kind of dealt with, I know you guys probably don't hear it much on the video, but we definitely heard it and we definitely dealt with it. But we came
Targets were going everywhere.
Oh yeah, but we came to a pretty good conclusion. So we did a kind of a speed shot test. We didn't want to shoot super fast, but we wanted to be somewhat fast and accurate. And Parker did, he's going to put up right now the pictures of the...
Well, I'll put up both of our best shot, both precision-wise and accuracy-wise.
And let me tell you this, we were both kind of surprised. So for mine, my best shot was with the M&P 45. His best shooting, which I think you can all guess, was the 1911, but his best grouping that he found was with the Canik 9mm. Now for me, for my 9mm, the one that I carry every day, my Palmetto, we did have some complications on the range. So I took 5 shots, which you'll be able to see in the photo. I took 5 shots, center mass, and then my sight went off, which again, that's another thing that we wanted to talk about with you guys is the pros and cons of everything. So for us, we both noticed that the steel framed guns, although a little bit heavier, both managed recoil much, much better. What were some things that you noticed?
When it comes to 45, it is a little bit harder to get back on target when you start to shoot. But one thing you got to remember with 45 is any shot on the torso area is most likely going to stop someone from continuing to come at you. And
even though we both, we didn't shoot our best today, but we were both pretty happy with the shots, especially for them being 1/3 body size targets. So with the accuracy we had, if it was a life or death situation, the problem would have been handled. But there were some other things that we noticed. So for me, I noticed that it was definitely easier to do faster shooting with the polymer framed striker fired pistols, both the 45 and my Palmetto State Armory. I was back on target a lot faster. My trigger pull was a little bit faster for both. But besides that, what we did notice for both of us, it really has to do with what you train with. He shoots his 1911 every time we go to the range. That is his everyday carry, and that's what he shoots. For me, mine is my Palmetto State Armory. Now, even with the red dot going off site, which it is a new red dot, and that happens with guns, but when that happened, I still had a very good group for a gun that I train with on a regular basis. Now, talking about some of the recoil factors, both of us know that when we're shooting the 1911, it has a lot more kick back towards you. So we both agreed in this discussion that the 45 M&P, so the polymer frame striker fired 45, handled much better than our 1911s, even though he shot better with the 1911, but the handling was a lot better.
Yeah, it kind of does, the way it kicks really lets your wrists not get fatigued during your shots. The 1911, the way it kicks is mostly back.
Yeah, it's more of a punch than a kick.
Yeah.
And then another thing that we both noticed was with the 9mm, we absolutely positively, even without training very often, because he doesn't shoot his Canik very often, we both were still pretty accurate with those. Now let's talk about some of the pros and cons of 9mm versus 45.
So when it comes to 9mm versus 45, there is a lot of things to consider. The first thing and the thing everyone talks about is capacity.
Yep. Now we actually shot 7 rounds of every gun because we wanted to match the size and capacity of the 1911s. But of course, anyone who knows a Glock 19 or a standard striker fired 9mm, for the most part, is about 12 or more of capacity. The M&P without an extended magazine is only 13 plus 1 capacity. Or no, 10 plus 1 capacity.
It's 10. It's
10 plus 1. So
you can get extended mags.
Which can be a little gaudy, to say the least. They stick out very far. So when it comes to capacity, we have both agreed that 9mm won.
Yeah. There are some things to consider when it comes to capacity as well, which will kind of bring us into our next point. But capacity, the reasoning behind it, you can't just say, oh, this has more ammo, ergo it's better, because once again, you may have to take more shots with a 9mm than you would a 45.
Absolutely. So with the power, not only can you visibly see the bigger holes, obviously that a 45 takes with the actual paper or a standard target, but you actually have to think about the legit velocity of both rounds. Now I am going to pull up just to get a direct number, but the velocity on a 45 is a little different than a 9mm. So for a 230 grain 45 ACP is 830 feet per second, which is not very good. And then with a 1911 style, which is what he has, is 950 feet per second. So when you think about it, it is a fat, slow bullet. So you're going to have more drop. You're going to have, you're not going to have the same distance and range. Now with a 9mm,
although he says that I did hit a target at 200 yards away with my 1911.
Yeah. Now with the 9mm cartridges, the standard one from a 4-inch barrel is 1150 to 1200 feet per second. Now, of course, with both, you can get plus P ammunition, which will jump up the velocity for both. But the 9mm plus P is significantly higher in velocity than the plus P 45. So when it comes to velocity, 9mm wins, but when it comes to power, the 45 wins.
It's just the fatter surface area that it's hitting with kind of negates some of that velocity at certain ranges. Now you will be able to hit a lot more consistently with a 9mm at distance, depending on what kind of distance you're talking about. Maybe around 50 yards or so is where you'll start to see the differences in those.
Absolutely.
Which is a reasonable engagement range. You never know, someone may be running at you from that distance.
Now, one thing that we did not talk about, or we didn't cover in the actual range video, was penetration. Now, the reason why is because in many tests at a close range, it is so minuscule of a difference between a 45 and a 9mm that we don't really consider that to be a big factor. Yeah. For us, it is much more about, especially for both of us, is the kind of shot groups you can have and the speed of fire. Now, when it comes to grouping, I think we can both agree that it would probably be 9mm, and the rate of fire also would go to 9mm. But when it comes to 45, one 45 is almost double the size of a standard 9mm. So if you can become accurate with a 45, it's a pretty solid group.
A 45 is just one of those guns where you can probably tag somebody in the chest or even anywhere in their torso area once and move to your next target.
Now, some things that we both want to talk about. So we were cracking some jokes about this, but the first one is, 45 won 2 world wars. And now, for a lot of people, that's absolutely true. But then we can have the same argument with 9mm that it is the most sold caliber in the world besides .22 long rifle. So when it comes to that, more people carry 9mm on a day-to-day basis than a 45. And the reason why that is usually due to weight factor and capacity factor.
And the size of most 9mm are going to be more compact than your standard.
Absolutely.
45.
And anyone who's ever shot in a small gun knows that if you were to have a 45 chambered small gun, it is going to kick way more than a 9mm.
Yeah.
So that is another thing that you have to take into consideration. Now, I'm just going to defend 45 for a second, even though me and him, I'm the 9mm guy, he's the 45 guy. We have kind of noticed that in this specific test, 9mm, sadly, in his thing, does win in a lot of the categories. But when it comes to a self-defense round, 45 is really hard to beat due to its power and due to the fact that it has a lot more foot-pounds of pressure when hitting someone. So it actually has that phrase, knockdown power, while 9mm usually doesn't. So you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt, whichever way you feel.
Ultimately, the choice comes up to you.
Yeah.
Do you want something that you will have to train with more? While I am a huge lover of 45, and I will defend it to the day I die, 9mm is easier to train yourself to use.
Yep, and for us, we're both pretty big guys. 45 isn't hard for us to shoot, but someone like my wife, who's smaller statured, or like a fun video of my son shooting one, it's not easy. So for someone who's a smaller framed, or someone who's maybe not as big and kind of broad as we are, most likely 9mm is going to be a little bit more your route. But if you're a big guy, don't be afraid to carry around a 1911, man. They're beautiful.
Regardless of what your stature is, no matter what you pick, you will have to do some kind of training with it.
With both.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Regardless of which one you choose. Now, with that being said, I am going to say that 45 will probably take most people more time to train their accuracy, their precision, and consistency with.
Now, some of the things that I just wanted to add onto the list, just for more consideration. 45 is a gun that, especially the caliber, it is a very powerful caliber. Because of this, you are more likely to have to do more maintenance on your 45. So the spring life of a 45 ACP, a 1911, is roughly between 2,500 and 3,000 rounds. A 9mm spring is between 4,500 and 5,000 rounds. So that is something also you need to take into consideration. Ammunition price, 9mm is significantly cheaper than 45. Almost half, well, I wouldn't say half the price, about 2/3 the price, probably.
You're probably going to spend about $10 more.
Yeah, a box for 45.
Yeah.
But there are some things to say that I've noticed, especially in my time with 45. You can find ammunition that has a lot of power to it, that has less recoil than your standard. We actually found ammunition that was very light shooting. It was a standard 230 grain projectile, but the powder was just a little less, and it was so smooth shooting. If that was what we would have used for this test, we probably would be singing a different tune. But for your standard full metal jacket 45, it packs a punch.
Yeah, and for all of the tests we did on this, we used the same ammo types in both guns.
Yeah, we both used Blazer ammo. Yep,
tips.
so Blazer ammo is what we used for the 9mm. And then for the 45, we used Federal.
It was Blazer as well.
Blazer as well? Okay.
Yeah, we used Blazer brass tip on both.
Yep.
Or not brass, copper tips, sorry.
Yep, full metal jackets. So yeah. Standard full metal jackets. Now, another thing that we both want to talk about is that you can get defensive ammo for both. You can change powers. You can get a lighter load, a heavier load. One thing I will say when it comes to 45s is when you're getting defensive ammunition, if you want to have the power of a 45, but you don't like the major kick, try to get something that's less velocity, which will mean less recoil. We had these, it was like critical, I think it was the critical duties that we shot. They were extremely soft shooting, felt like a 9mm. But they still had that big old 45 bullet, and realistically, to an assailant, it wouldn't have really meant a difference, except for the handling of the firearm for yourself and for the recoil management for yourself. So when it comes to those kinds of situations, you really get to kind of play the field for both. But sadly, guys, we do have to, put it to rest. The answer for which one is better for in general purpose
completely comes to preference. It's not.
Now, I know you guys wanted us to say one, but even with what we saw, we couldn't decide because we both love carrying 45. We both love carrying 9mm. Well, me more than him. But we would both, absolutely depend our lives on these firearms. So we're not worried about that. But if we did have to call a winner,
just 45.
It would have been 9mm. All right, guys.
Absolutely incorrect.
If you like this video, like, comment, subscribe. We'd love to hear from you guys. If you guys want us to do another comparison video on ammunition types, we were thinking about doing a rifle one next, so we'd love to hear from you guys. But remember, guys,
that is the rule, but survival is the exception.
We'll see you guys next time.